Symposium. Thank you all for getting up early on this Saturday morning and joining us. We've got a full day of speakers. We're going to try and move very quickly through a wonderful roster of speakers and performances today. We're starting off with a live feed from LA by a very interesting art entrepreneur, I would call him, Stefan Simchowitz, who is originally from South Africa and moved to the United States and started collecting art about 10 years ago. Last night I had another long telephone conversation with Stefan, and I said, how can I describe you? Because when I go on your website, it seems that you do everything. And he said, well, first of all, I'm an art collector. Secondly, I'm an art dealer. I'm an art entrepreneur. I'm a cultural entrepreneur. I'm a fabricator, and I'm a property developer. So I think if you'd like to get more detailed information on Stefan, you should go on his website after his talk. He's going to give us about a 20-minute talk, and we can ask questions, and there'll be feedback at the end. Stefan is looking at the art world and the art gallery system from a more critical point of view. He has engaged with most art galleries in the United States. He's been a great customer of galleries in the United States and internationally, and he has a lot of critical views on how the art gallery system is evolving and will evolve going forward. Stefan also has interesting contacts with Asia. He has an exhibition that he's collaborating with Pearl Lam on, an artist from LA. He's also hosted collectors from Beijing in his studio in LA. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Stefan Simchowitz on the Skype from LA. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's very unsettling because I can't see you and you can see me, which is strange. So I'm looking at myself, which is sort of frightening, but nevertheless. So thank you for inviting me to this. So I'm just going to sort of ramble on about the art business, and if anyone wants to interject and ask questions, they can. Since I was told I must make this Hong Kong specific, I suppose it's a great opportunity to promote the artist Corpor, who I manage, and he has a show with Pearl Lam in early January. She's opened a fabulous new space there, and I'm sure all of you know Pearl. She's the great, legendary gallerist. Even in LA, she is revered. So we're excited about that. And, I wanted to talk about distribution, production, financing, collecting today, and give you an idea of how I think the art business is shifting, along with every other business in the world. I am a great fan of Eastern thinking, of Confucianism, and of the ideas that systems and families and social political environments can be brought together by essentially units who collaborate with each other. Confucian philosophy, the cornerstone of it is sort of the family comes together and looks after the family. And I think in the culture industry, we face epic challenges. We have a sort of a very strange business because on the one hand, we have a tremendous proliferation of art schools and amazing materials with which to make art, and a huge abundance of artists producing all over the world and making really interesting work in different fields, from painting to video to political art to art about gender and identity to photography, from Africa to Asia to the West. Unfortunately, the support structures for these artists are under attack, and those support structures have historically been the gallery system, the small gallery system, the mid-sized gallery system. As we've seen a huge consolidation of the big gallery system, who are able to effectively market a handful of artists who effectively take most of them and accustomed to marketing artists in line with sort of traditional luxury brands, as have the auction houses. And this has created a bit of a strange environment of a seemingly extremely healthy art business, and yet on the other side, an extraordinarily impoverished art business. And this is something that I'm fascinated in, because essentially the art that is traded and sold within the big gallery system in the auction houses often has very little to do with cultural events or current production. In other words, it's not so much contemporary art as it is sort of marketed art. And I have examined the business structurally and sort of looked at how these different systems work and tried to sort of figure out, well, what is the fundamental thing that artists need in order to succeed and compete with these sort of hegemonic systems of distribution and production. And I think it's a very simple thing. They need capital. They need working capital. Their studios are factories. They're crucibles of creativity. And these crucibles of creativity, like every other industry, very simply need sufficient working capital to buy materials, to finance the studio, hire assistants if needed be, finance production of video, photography, whatever. And unfortunately, as we have seen the proliferation of art fairs and the proliferation of galleries all over the world competing with each other, we've seen an overinvestment in marketing and expansion of square footage space, both institutionally and at the gallery level, and an underinvestment in physical production. And I think very much, in a sense, like a technology company, whereby in a technology company, there is a fixation on developing good product. And once you have good product, then you launch. And I really believe that if artists have enough working capital and the breathing space, not to be worried about paying rent next month, but the breathing space to actually focus on production, the product will be much better. And once the product is great, the distribution comes automatically. So I'm very much lensed towards financing production and making sure that artists have whatever they need to achieve these goals. And we come to the second sort of issue, which is distribution once you have the product. And this is where I believe young galleries, mid-sized galleries, really need to come together and collaborate in both sharing of information, in other words, which collectors are buying, sharing of risk, in other words, do we share an art fair booth together, do we ship goods together, and an overall openness and collaboration towards distribution of the artists they represent. So I really encourage galleries to be much more open with the information that they have and much less sort of cagey about it, because the only way that we are able to sort of fight or hold back the onslaught of sort of art as luxury goods and the hegemonic production of brand name artists is to be very creative in our message to market them. And there's a sort of Western tradition which sort of says the victor wins the spoils and the victor writes history. And I think Eastern philosophy is culturally very different. You know, it's about the yin and yang of two things coming together. It's about collaboration versus competition, and you know, it's about the coming down of hierarchical systems and to distributed non-hierarchical systems and integrate together and collaborate in a sort of a network that's noded together. And I think this is really important. I think the East is going to play a big part in this because philosophically, I think there's a very different relationship to sort of the same Western structures. And I'm very interested in reaching out to smaller galleries, you know, in Hong Kong, in mainland China, and seeing if we can collaborate with some of them, with some of the artists who I represent and manage and work with closely. You can find many of them on my website, Simcoe's Club, which is a plethora of information of both good and terrible press that I've received over the past few years, as well as some links to my photography. I shoot for Italian Vogue as a hobby, and I've done a number of stories for them, which is my first passion. I take a lot of pictures, and if anyone follows me on Facebook or Instagram, I'll get an idea of that. But I think that the idea of East-West transfer of cultures is very important. I've collected not many Chinese artists, but I collect one named Zhu Yilin, whose work I love. I think he's it's a new language of Chinese art that I haven't seen before. It's sort of very much like Albert Oehlen and Martin Kippenberger.
And there's a gallerist in LA named Mihai Nicodem who introduced me to the work, and I've bought quite a bit of it. I think he's represented by Pace now, and he's a wonderful artist, and I just find the voice to be really fresh and sort of not traditionally Chinese in how I've sort of traditionally seen Chinese art distributed in the West. And another artist named Lu Guai is another artist who makes these sort of simple line drawings I've collected. Petra Kortright, the artist who you see behind me, who is a painter who works within digital mediums. She makes digital videos, digital JPEG paintings, and digital paintings that get produced on aluminum substrates and linen substrates, is doing a show with Blank next year in China, along with Mark Horowitz, a painter I represent. So, I'm very interested in this collaboration. We're also doing a project with Jens Forshu, who's going to be showing Zachary Armstrong in China at his foundation, which I'm very excited about. He's an amazing collector, and he did great shows of Peter Doig and Anselm Kiefer. So I think the idea is to try and open up these bands of communication, East-West. LA is very close to the East, so it's sort of, I think, easier than New York. But clearly the energy is moving eastwards. I think New York is central, of course, always will be, but I think it's much less important to be in London or New York or LA or Paris now. I think because we're connected globally, I think the hierarchy of distribution is evening out, and the impact of sort of singular distribution in one geographic region is no longer as strong as it used to be. This is about as long as I can talk uninterrupted for it, so I'm going to throw it to the audience to ask me questions. Hello? The audience is silent, has no questions. Can you guys, is there someone there to mediate this or not? No.
Hello.
Okay, so
hi, Stefan. This is Meg. I'm here to semi-moderate.
Yeah.
I think we'd like to hear a little bit more about. You told me last night that you've hosted some Chinese collectors in your studio in LA. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that went.
I mean, they were great. They all came over. There's pictures of them on my Facebook, and they were great. They knew all about me, which I was pretty impressed with. They said they followed me on social media in China, and they were really impressive. They were clued up. They were a terrific group, all very different, and I enjoyed them. Very sophisticated, like much more knowledgeable and forward-thinking than I'd expected. Very encouraging, actually. Far away from this idea of like the cliche of this sort of, Chinese collector, just looking to buy branded goods. I mean, they were sophisticated, deep-thinking, thoughtful people. And, I think China is really the next dominant place on Earth. So I think it's really,
we're losing
with people. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. So in the next year or so, what are your plans for Asia? When will we see you in Hong Kong and China or the region?
I hate flying. So and I'm South African. I've traveled a lot in my life. So I'm not an American who hates leaving the country. I just hate flying, So I go to Australia once a year. I try to stay in LA because I find it much more effective if I'm not on a plane all my life and not like, recovering from late nights of drinking. And so I sort of operate like in the cockpit of an F-16, in my place. Because the way I've structured my business, I sort of coordinate with my team. And we have an amazing team. Rosie, my partner, who runs the business, Lisa, my right hand, Pamaris, and we built like a team, and we facilitate about 60 to 70 shows a year globally, all over the world, with our artists. With artists we set up with gallery shows. that we're very busy just logistically making sure that the operation runs. So we think of ourselves as we want to be all horsepower, we want to be all engine and very little body. So our physical presence in art fairs or other places is very limited. I go see galleries in LA. I like to see art in person, and I find slowing it down and not moving around so much gives you time to think. And you know, everything sort of seems to flow through LA in some way, shape, or form, or New York or London. I go once a year to London, but not necessarily timed with the Art World calendar, because the Art World calendar is sort of this motion of migratory people who are all at the same time, at the same place, you know, in different geographies. So it's very circular. So I like, you know, if the rhythm is up, I like to be down. If the rhythm is down, I like to be up. I like to sort of synchronize myself in the opposite way. So I see things differently. I see different things at different times. And, you know, one of the things I used to do is when Art Basel Miami opened, and I was living in New York, I wouldn't go to Art Basel Miami. That's the day I would go to the galleries in New York and buy stuff. And it was always amazing because there were things that you literally sometimes couldn't get because they were sold out in the art fair, and you could sort of get from the gallery at a huge discount because the relationships are different. Or, you know, you go to the art fair on the last day when you sort of see what's actually going on. So I don't come out that much. I go to Australia once a year. I have a home there in the Blue Mountains. I go walk around the mountains for a month and think, make calls, look at art. I think really a lot of collecting now is to slow things down. I really believe we have to just breathe, think, look, and not move in this sort of speedy way. I think the art fairs are great. You know, I know the business very, very well, so I think the art fairs are really great for younger collectors to get, you know, broader points of view, to meet young gallerists and mid-sized gallerists, to sort of build a relationship, see what they do, and then throughout the course of the year, follow them, because these, you know, 3-day events are really opportunities to meet a gallery and not just look at what's on the wall of the gallery at the time, but maybe it's not that interesting what they're bringing to the fair, but to build a relationship with them and follow them rigorously to see what their programming is like. And I find every single gallery who is interesting and credible eventually finds one or two artists who become superstars. And you really have to sort of pay attention to this, because you can quite easily, you know, buy one or two artists. There's no such thing as buying the wrong artist or buying the right artist, but one can sort of miss the really great artist because you're focused on what that gallery has at the time. And I think the art fair should be used as an opportunity to sort of get an idea of the landscape of who they are, where they are, what they do. You know, I urge collectors to you know, when I go to an art fair, I run through the whole. If I meet a young dealer, a gallerist, I don't know, I try and sit down for 20 minutes and like run through the whole program on an iPad and ask them about what's this. So really, you know, I think you know, art fairs are sort of treated like shopping malls today. You kind of walk around, you have a champagne, and you get some hors d'oeuvres, and you blah blah blah, and then you find yourself at like the booth of some mega gallery where they've got like their abattoir ready art for millions of dollars ready to sort of get killed, you know, and you walk in there and you end up, you know, spending $1 million on a Damien Hirst, and, you know, all the young dealers are there. They provided the entertainment. So I think it's very important to spend time in like the Nova sections, and you can learn a lot. And you know, these gallerists and dealers spend their whole lives, you know, thinking about this stuff. So they've got a lot of moves to share. You just have to sort of pay attention to what they're actually doing as opposed to what they're doing at the time. And sometimes I think they can be very tired at art fairs and exhausted. So you sort of have to just be relaxed and get to know them. Any other questions?
Are there any other questions from the audience? I have one more question. I mean, sitting in LA as an observer of sort of the gallery system and the gallery situation around you, how do you see the gallery world evolving?
the big gallery world continues to consolidate power, distribution. They become much more integrated. They have huge advantages of scale, of pricing, of control. So I think the sort of the system of the bigger galleries, the Roener, Hauser, Gagosian, and the emerging giants like Thaddeus Ropac, I think they gain a lot of strength. But their infrastructures essentially don't make it very worthwhile for them to deal with artists who are inexpensive, and that means sort of sub $50,000. It's just not worth it. So you have this huge opportunity in this category of artists who are under $50,000, even under $100,000, who are not particularly well represented or well distributed or marketed for a number of reasons: lack of capital, lack of coordination, lack of experience in building a gallery, because these are small, mid-sized galleries. You have a lot of sort of paranoia of galleries. Your galleries tend to sort of have a lot of cliches about what kind of ideas they think about how a market works. Artists also have cliches. They sort of have these illusions about collectors and illusions about good people or bad people, and they're often very cliched ideas and not relevant to what is really happening. And that's because there's a lot of naivete in the small system. So I think there's going to be, I think it's underway, is 2008 when the market collapsed. It was like an immediate, like everything stopped and it got restarted. It was like a reboot. It was like a heart attack and you just jump started. And I think we're going through a huge transition, which not to be grim, I call death by 1,000 cuts, which is the gallery system is sort of, it's a little cut and you bleed a little bit, it heals, you get another cut, and slowly you get drained. And I think we're going to see a huge consolidation in the mid-size and small gallery system. We're going to see a consolidation in the fair market. And I think that galleries, small and mid-size, really need to figure out how to collaborate, how to work within systems creatively with each other, with collectors, with financiers, with artists, and need to understand that there has to be flexibility, sharing of information, and a much more open attitude and less judgmental attitude towards representation and distribution. And also, I think young galleries start off and they have this image in their head that they want to one day be David Zwirn or Larry Gagosian. Now, both of whom are, estimable characters and people I admire greatly and are hugely successful and who wouldn't want to have a business like this. But we live in a different time. We're not building businesses in the 1980s, in the pre-internet era, it's a totally different era. So I think this business model of I'm going to build a gallery, I'm going to become a mid-sized gallery and then a big gallery, and I'm going to open up a branch here and there, I think it's the wrong thinking. I think instead of making these entities people you aspire to become like, respect them because they deserve respect, because they built great businesses and they're terrific operators and they've really been very good in many respects for bringing culture to broader audiences. But don't try be them. Vision and develop and build new systems. So don't worry about becoming, the gallery that's above the chain. The chain. Be very creative in how you approach cultural distribution. Culture is everywhere. When you go to a restaurant and you go to the bathroom, I'm often amazed because I sometimes, get to meditate in bathrooms, and I look on the walls and there's usually art on the wall of the bathroom. And there's art everywhere. It's in the restaurants. It's on the side of the streets. It might not be like art intentionally put there as art, but there is so much space for art to be distributed. Focus on that. Focus on expanding the market, on really recruiting new places for distribution, because you can't compete with the with the mainline systems. So I think if you analyze concepts like asymmetry, for example, or asymmetrical competitive behaviors. If someone has a huge tactical advantage over you in real estate, in investment, in decades lead, you can't compete in a symmetrical way with them. You have to find the asymmetry, and you have to compete asymmetrically, and that means you have to be faster. You have to analyze risk in a different way. You have to maybe try and distribute your art to a different audience that might not be perceived as deified as the others. Big galleries tend to give preference to someone who's on the board of a museum, but maybe the person to give preference to is the young guy who's going to be a billionaire in 10 years, who's not on the board of a museum, but if you don't buy him art, he's never going to end up on the board of the museum, and maybe if you do sell him art, he'll be chairman of the board of the museum in 10 years. So the art business is very conservative. It's sort of stuck in these notions and ideas of political correctness, especially today more than ever. It's really become stratified on the one hand between extreme wealth and money and exclusion, which is sort of expressed in like the Leonardo da Vinci sale last night, and big ticket items going for numbers that people just don't understand. And then it's also sort of on the other side, it's sort of trapped by the intellectuals who are sort of fixated on sort of these sort of ideas of ideas that are sort of curators are very good at talking about and creating context for. And sort of in the center's been lost. And the center is really about art. What is a painting? What is a photograph? How does it function? How does a collector work? And in every aspect of culture today, society, business, we've lost the center. There is no center. You've got, I was fascinated. I looked at Art Review's Power 100 list, and I was amazed at it. Hito Steyerl was the most powerful person in the art world. Now, she's a great thinker. I respect the work greatly, the writing greatly, but no one in the audience I'm talking to, except a handful of people, know who she is. And if you look at how the list is constructed, it's not about the most powerful people in the art world. It's really a political statement. And we have to stop making political statements to such a degree. They become alienating. And we have to stop buying art on the other side just to make money as an investment. We have to find a middle ground. And that means we have to force the institutions to open up, to not be so, there was a great case I read recently. There were 4 women artists who were nominated for a prize sponsored by BMW. And they gave their nominations back to BMW. Like, this is ridiculous. You don't care about our art. You are just giving us this award because we're 4 women from 4 different parts of the earth. You're sort of co-opting our identity for your corporate brand, and that's wrong. And I think we're seeing in the institutional establishment something that is on the left, something that is really extreme and has really been a takeover of art business to such a degree that really it's a bunch of people in a room just talking to each other. And on the right, it's a bunch of people in a room just talking to each other. On the right side of the equation, they're just very rich people talking to each other. And on the left side of the business, they're the intellectuals, the curators, the writers, the people who work at the fancy galleries. We have to leave the confines of these two structures. We have to walk to the center. And it's uncomfortable because you're going to get attacked as you walk to the center. You're going to get attacked from the people who care about money. You're going to get attacked from the intellectuals. But in the center is where there is great art. There's a lot of people interested in engaging in art but don't have the correct pathway or guidance to do so. And it's where the bulk of the market is. And finding that center is critical to the survival of a heterogeneous support system for cultural production today.
Thank you, Stefan. You've given us a lot to think about. Are there any other questions from the audience? I think everyone's just sort of waking up back here in Hong Kong. Hold on one second. Here's a question.
Hi, Stefan. I think you're a great advocate of using social media to popularize or distribute art. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, social media is, in the art business, a format of asymmetrical competition. It is free. It's accessible to everyone. You don't need to have a gallery space to market art using social media. And you can engage and build an audience from whatever geographical location you are from, and no matter who you are. So it's extraordinarily powerful and equalizing. If you're able to sort of build the right audience. So I think one of my great passions is photography. I've taken pictures since I'm 15, and anyone who knows me well will know I care greatly about it. I take pictures just about every day of everything and everyone. And it's a way of communicating with people. It's a way of documenting my experience. And when the Facebook and Instagram platforms came about, I suddenly was a very skilled photographer who was able to sort of put images up there that were high quality. And without people necessarily thinking, oh, this is a good image. It just, so when you look at magazines or billboards, you don't think, oh, that's a really great picture. They're just good images. So the social media becomes stickier. So I sort of use my photography in social media to make my social media stickier, and also made sure that every day I curate my social media in a way that, is not just about art, but it's topical. There's an expression of my political points of views, my ideas about the world, things that I'm thinking about, things that I'm reading, both philosophically. And really it's sort of a way of sort of having a discourse that is quite real and quite complex and varied. So you attract a much larger cross-section of people. And I remember when Trump got elected, I did not vote for Trump, for the record, but when he got elected, people were very alienated and polarized as they are today, whereby I have friends who, if you voted for Trump, they'll never talk to you again. And I don't share that attitude at all. I had breakfast with someone who voted for Trump the other day, and I'm like, great, well, explain why. And I think what the art world has done to itself in using social media is they've sort of alienated people with different points of view. So again, I don't need to go and tell you how social media is important in marketing art, but what I can tell you is that it really is important for an artist and for a gallery to really think of building a cultural platform as a political platform. One needs huge agency and huge distribution of agency across a very wide spectrum of audiences to get an artist's support. And that means you must have liberals, you must have conservatives, you must have people from Africa, you must have people from Asia, you must have people from America, you must have Jews, you must have Hispanic. You really need to have a vegetable soup of support. And I think social media has become alienating today because the algorithms they're like a waiter at a restaurant. Oh, Mr. Simchowitz, you like chicken salad? Oh, we've got 5 chicken salads on the menu today. They're serving you the food that you're comfortable eating. They're like, oh, here's a candy bar, and you have to sort of really accept that you can have discourse and conflict within your social media platforms. So you have a chance of kind of, getting the image out there. And I think cultural distribution happens as much physically today as it does on the internet. But audience marginalization occurs algorithmically through the platforms. And that is something that unfortunately manually you have to counterbalance. You have to actually you have to spend a lot more time who get things and not controlling who gets to say it, allowing more people to say things than not. And I think that's quite challenging for people because you get judged so easily today for having an opinion that differs to your audience that you can get battered around quite quickly. The internet is a pretty brutal place, and I think you sort of have to have the courage to stand on a rock that is a position that you're willing to defend. And then social media is so much more complex today than it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago was a place where you could find something or discover something. It's a very different system today, and one that's probably going to change even more dramatically in the next few years going forward. I hope that answers your question in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you very much, Stefan. We're going to have to close now and move on to our next panel. please, speaking of social media, please watch us on Facebook. We'll be doing a live feed all day of the rest of the symposium.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
You've been very good. Thank you.